listener production.
Hi, happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. There's a new phone scam that is being reported on around the world, and it's pretty horrifying.
Most people who are posting videos online have left more than is needed to gain a decent amount of audio to make a decent copy of their voices.
That's right. While it hasn't apparently been used in Australia just yet, a new scam has emerged that is using deepfaked AI-cloned voices of your loved ones to try and persuade you into sending them money. In the second half of the episode, you'll learn all about the increased risk of AI audio scamming and how you can make sure that neither you or your loved ones will fall victim to it. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Katrina Blowers. It's Friday, the 15th of March.
Hello, Sasha. Hi, everyone. Well, criticism is growing of the Australian government's handling of visas, this time for Palestinians fleeing the conflict in Gaza.
It's a very difficult circumstance. These decisions are made upon advice.
Yeah, so it was revealed this week that women and children had found out their visas to enter Australia had been revoked when they were already on their way here. The Palestine Australia Relief and Action Group says it's aware of at least 9 cases of this happening in recent days, including a man in his 20s yesterday. It leaves those turned away in no man's land because people leaving Gaza aren't usually allowed to return. For example, the family of the man in his 20s say he's now stuck in Turkey. He's never travelled, he's never been on a plane, and now he has no visa to Australia and he can't return to Egypt where he travelled from, Sasha.
Yeah, so the other part to this story is it's understood the issue of revoked visas has only become a problem over the last week, and those affected are left wondering why and what's happened. Advocates say the government is not being transparent about what has changed. The Home Affairs Department has told Palestinians their visas are being pulled because they may want to stay here once their 12 months runs out. And the opposition leader has also weighed in, calling the situation unprecedented. But Peter Dutton has repeated his position that it is not in our best interest to accept refugees from war zones. Katrina, I couldn't help but go back and Google and see what the Liberal government's response was to Ukrainian refugees fleeing the crisis there when war broke out. And that was not Peter Dutton's position back then. So it's an interesting one to take now.
A 47-year-old Australian woman is one of 2 foreign tourists who've been killed in a landslide in Bali after her villa was swept away. So she was staying in a place called Jatilui that's around an hour northwest of Ubud, and it's pretty famous for its rice terraces. So there was a heap of heavy rain in that area. It eroded water canals that were being used for irrigation, and they apparently sat above the villa and then triggered the landslide. Local authorities say the victims were evacuated from the debris while in sleeping positions. That's pretty tragic. There were 2 victims, a man and a woman in one bed. That second victim is a Dutch national.
Landslides in Indonesia, Katrina, have been aggravated in some places by deforestation as well, with prolonged torrential rain then causing flooding, which can then lead to what we've seen here, which, as you said, is really, really tragic and sad. Landslides and floods triggered by intense rains on Sumatra Island last week killed at least 27 people. And over the last 8 years, Indonesia has had around 4,000 landslides. The electric vehicle industry in Australia is booming, with a 120% rise in sales recorded over the last year. That's according to the Australian Electric Vehicle Industry Recap 2023, and there are now more than 180,000 EVs on Aussie roads. More than half of those were bought last year. The report also showed charging infrastructure locations increased by 75% in just 1 year, with over 800 stations now in place across Australia. Now, let's look at the states. The ACT love EVs the most. They account for more than 20% of all new vehicles sold in the territory. New South Wales EV sales grew at least 9%, Queensland's at 8.3% and Victoria 8%. And EVs now represent about 1% of all light vehicles in Australia, so that number is still low, Katrina. But it's really good to see the uptake is finally kind of happening and gaining some momentum.
Yeah, we were just discussing how lately I feel like I'm seeing new EVs everywhere. I feel like, so many people are swapping over, which raises some questions about what are all our petrol vehicles going to be worth, Sasha, when you and I finally get around to being able to afford to upgrade our petrol cars to an EV. Who knows what that's going to mean. We still have so far to go, though, when it comes to our uptake in Australia, even though it is tracking pretty well. Norway, for example, did you know that 80% of all passenger vehicle sales in Norway in 2022 were EVs. Iceland is pretty progressive too at 41%. Even China, 22%. So, yeah, still lagging behind. One day you and I will get there, Sasha.
I hope so.
And the third launch of a SpaceX mega rocket that will one day put humans back on the moon has made it further than ever before, but it was lost before its planned return to Earth. The Starship vehicle's 2 previous flights lasted only minutes before blowing up. This one did a fair bit better. SpaceX says it lost contact with the rocket about an hour into this flight, but it did re-enter the atmosphere. Here's the moment.
And just the fact that we have used through entry, this is incredible.
Yeah. Again, this is the furthest and fastest that Starship has ever flown.
Yeah, very cool, Katrina. The hope had been for a splashdown, though, in the Indian Ocean. But as you said, it was lost, and that was just after it re-entered the atmosphere about an hour into the flight. The team was no longer able to connect to its communication and tracking services. Look, failures in this phase of testing are considered normal, but NASA is watching very carefully, given this spaceship has been chosen to ferry future astronauts to the moon as soon as 2026. Now, that raises questions for me. If we're having lost vehicles floating around in space 2 years out from potentially including humans inside these spaceships, that would give me pause for thought at NASA. But they're the experts. I don't know anything about space technology.
Yeah, you couldn't pay me enough money. We did a great briefing last year on a sheep farmer who ended up with space junk in one of his paddocks. I wonder if this is going to end up somewhere wild like that. You never know.
Yeah, well, that's my question. They go, yeah, it's just lost. And I'm like, but lost where? Is it floating around in the atmosphere? Is it going to come and splash down in some other ocean? Who knows? But yeah, it's always fun to see these new innovations in the space race. Look, before we go, I did also want to shout out a bunch of our listeners who have reached out this week in response to our Real Estate Royal Commission story. We spoke to 3 really interesting people Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we got great response from some listeners. I wanted to shout out one particular listener, Sharon, who sent us a DM. And she said, on the rental crisis, Australia's cultural obsession with owning property has contributed to poor rental standards. It's seen as something you do when you're a student or you're poor or you're, quote, between houses. This has helped to categorise renting and therefore renters as less valuable than owning and owners. This is how real estate agents treat you. And while I've had agents who are nice to my face, I know the balance of power in the relationship is always skewed towards the landlord. Rental standards need to be set to optimum rather than minimum. And I thank Sharon for her very considered and well thought out response. And I think that's how a lot of renters are feeling at the moment, as we heard from Purple Pingers and also Max Chandler Mather. So thank you to everyone who has been in touch this week or commented on a video. Keep doing that. Next up, though, is our deep dive into the new AI deepfake scam.
Imagine this scene for a moment.
Your grandmother wakes up in the middle of the night. The phone is ringing and it's you on the other end, distressed.
Does that sound a bit off to you? Not quite me, but pretty close. That was an AI-generated clone of my voice. It was the best I could do in an hour using a free service on the internet. But we know that there's much higher quality voice clone technology available right now, and it's having some pretty scary consequences. People in the US have been woken up in more or less exactly this situation. Their loved one calls from a private number in an emotional state, saying they've been kidnapped, and you need to transfer cash or they'll be killed. In a panic, you transfer the money. Then you call their actual phone and find out they're fine. You've been scammed in maybe the most upsetting way imaginable. The Australian government's National Anti-Scam Centre says it's unclear at this stage if this kind of scam has hit Australian shores. But cybersecurity experts say if it's happening in the US, then we in Australia need to prepare for it now. One such expert is Toby Murray. He's an associate professor of computing and information systems at the University of Melbourne. Tony, how does this scam work?
Yeah, so how this scam works is that we've got really sophisticated AI technology now that allows someone to take a recording of somebody's voice and then to use the AI technology to then synthesize a clone of that voice and have someone speak the words that you choose them to speak in a voice that you choose to clone. So, for instance, I might receive a phone call that appears to be coming from, say, my child, my teenage son, for instance. Maybe you've got an older child who's traveling overseas, which is a really common variant on this scam. I'm backpacking throughout Europe, lost my phone, lost my wallet. I need you to wire some money, but it's going to go to this account here that you haven't seen before because, it's a mate that I've, hooked up with here or whatever, right? And of course, the intention here is to convince you that it really is your loved one that is asking for the money because the voice sounds so convincing because this AI technology has now gotten good enough to produce convincing clones of people's voices.
There is something kind of unusually cruel about this kind of scam, isn't there? I've read about some examples in the US where, someone's been woken up at night by what they think is their mother-in-law saying that they've been kidnapped. Is this an escalation of the kind of, sadism of scams that we've seen?
It's a really good question. And of course, what the scammers are doing here is they're playing on people's emotions. When you're in a state in which you feel distressed because you think that a loved one is either in a tricky situation or in the case there that a fake kidnapping, right, where you've got someone highly in distress, right? The whole point is to absolutely get you freaked out so that you'll then not be making rational decisions and you'll think, oh, crikey, I better make that ransom payment straight away because you're so scared and emotionally heightened from that.
How is it that a scammer can get access to recordings of people's voices so that they can target their loved ones, or I guess the other way around?
In the modern age, we're all leaving so many digital footprints online. And once upon a time, that might have been who your friends are on Facebook or the posts that you've made on Twitter or whatever it might be. But of course, these days, with all of the video content that people are posting online, whether that's through Insta or through TikTok or whatever other platform, all of that is, of course, available now. And that provides a wealth of different audio that someone can use to then build these AI voice clones. So with a lot of the modern AI technology, it only takes, in some cases, seconds of audio to produce a reasonable quality clone of somebody's voice. And most people who are posting videos online have left more than is needed to gain a decent amount of audio to make a decent copy of their voices.
So someone who's posted a few videos on Instagram, or, for example, the host of a national podcast whose voice is all over the internet everywhere, might be at risk here. How convincing are these voice clones?
Yeah, so the technology is getting better all the time. And just as we've seen with all of the generative AI technology, of which this is one example, they're getting better and better at an ever faster rate as well. At the moment, you can make a pretty decent but not perfect clone of someone's voice with relatively little work in the space of a few minutes based on maybe 30 seconds of audio or something like that. But the more audio that there is available of someone online, the better chance you've got of producing high quality clones. And that's the reason why we've seen other variants of this scam using celebrities, because of course there's heaps of video content about celebrities online, and we've seen a recent variant of this scam on Facebook where there are deep fake endorsements of fake products that have been created, or where you've got someone saying, hey, I'm giving away free iPads or whatever, and all you need to do is to pay for the postage. Of course, it's a scam, but again, it works well when you've got a lot of content available online. So certainly as the host of a national podcast, you'd certainly be vulnerable there, Bension.
Damn. Is this the AI coming up with the words that the scammer is sending into the phone, or is this the scammer typing them in real time? How does it work in practice?
Yeah, so it both can work. So you might have a script that you begin with already, and you might have typed up various responses that you expect and have generated a voice for each, and then can play those as is needed. You can generate the voice in real time from what is being typed. And so if you've got a good English speaker who can type those responses and generate the voice in real time from the AI system, then that will certainly work well as well. But now, of course, with programs like ChatGPT, you don't even need a good English speaker in the first place. Exactly as you say, that another AI system can be generating the text that's then fed to the voice generation system to generate the voice. And so we're really at the point now where we've got an entire pipeline that allows someone who is maybe not a native English speaker at all to be able to convincingly fake the voice of someone who is, and then pull off these scams.
The ACCC, which runs ScamWatch, has told us that they're not aware of whether or not this scam is happening right now in Australia, but certainly there are prominent examples of it happening in the US. Do you think that, given the state of the technology, it's inevitable that we will start to see this here?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's a consensus that's widely held in Australia at the moment. We've seen statements from senior information security professionals at the major banks saying that they expect that their customers will soon be victimised by this scam if they're not already. Although, to my knowledge, none of the banks have reported that their customers have been targeted yet. But everyone expects that it's only a matter of time, just because of how quickly the technology is evolving and how quickly scammers adopt new technologies, because it makes them money. And if you can't create 100% convincing voice clone of someone with today's technology, you probably will by the end of the year, just due to the rate of evolution of the tech that we're seeing. And so I think everyone absolutely has to be aware that this is coming for us, and it will be here sooner rather than later.
So if you're someone who knows that their voice is on the internet somewhere, what should you be doing to prepare for this possibility?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that an individual can do here. If your voice is out there, and it will be for many people, then it is a reality that unfortunately someone may be able to create a convincing clone of your voice. And this is something that we're all going to have to get used to. And it's something that we've been hearing for a little while now, that with the rise of generative AI, it's not going to be the case that just because something looks or sounds realistic, that it is real. And that's something that all of us have to get used to, whether it's interpreting media or whether it's wondering whether the phone call you've received now is a scam. But I guess the thing for individuals to do is to really have that first line of awareness. The best defense against a scam is to be aware of the possibility of that scam. So the conversation that we're having now is great because it creates awareness that these kinds of scams are coming. And so when you get a phone call that purportedly is from your child in distress, but is coming from a number that you don't recognize, your first thought should be, well, it's much more likely that this is a scam than it is that my child has actually been kidnapped, because the probability of that occurring is incredibly, incredibly small, right? And that's what we've seen in the US, right? There was a case of a woman being targeted with a clone of their child's voice. And when she called 911, the emergency services personnel told her, look, this is almost certainly a scam. Because that's the reality, right? That the odds on you're being scammed.
A lot of people listening to this are millennials and Gen Z who might have parents, uncles, grandparents that might be more vulnerable than, say, other people to this kind of scam. Is there anything that we should be telling our loved ones about this? Should they ask us a specific question that only we would know the answer to? Is that something that might, get around it?
Yeah, you can definitely set up those kinds of precautions if you want to. We've certainly seen people say that, you could have a secret word that you tell your kids. If you need to come and ask me for money because you've lost your phone, then you're going to use this secret word so I know it's you and not a scam. People can definitely do that. My personal feeling is that you can do it, but it's probably not 100% necessary, just given that odds on you're probably being scammed rather than you're just being skeptical is probably going to do the job. We know that older Australians are more likely to be victims of scams, and that's simply just because of the awareness issue, that they're less aware of the fact these scams are out there in the first place. They're less aware of what the technology can do these days and how scammers are operating and leveraging that technology. And so the best thing we can do then is just to have those conversations to help make them aware of what sorts of scams are around. What is the capability of the technology?
Absolutely. Well, Toby, thanks so much for explaining that to us today.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Toby Murray there. That's it for the briefing this morning. You can check your feed again at 3 for another deep dive and hit follow so you never miss an episode. And if you like what we do here at the briefing, tell your friends about us. I'm Bension Siebert. Thanks for listening.
Listener.